Hi, it's Mr. Y, the Social Studies guy, with a very special episode of our YouTube program because, as we know, in Ohio here, we're also celebrating, like the rest of the United States, our 250th anniversary, a semi-quincentennial celebration. And in Ohio, it's really, really cool because they have different things for each month, different themes for each month. And for this month, February, it's innovation and industry. Now we're here today at Miller's Market in Clyde, Ohio, America's favorite small town. The reason we're here is this: when I taught 7th grade Ohio history, one of the first assignments I gave my students was to come right here to Miller's Market and find as many items as you could find right here that are made in Ohio. And the one thing I did not tell them is that if they would just look up Proctor and Gamble products, they could have found all kinds of them along the way. So we're going to talk about that first, but I do want to mention that Ohio is such a great state for inventors. You know, we know about Thomas Edison, we know about the Wright brother, we know about Harvey Firestone, but this is something we're going to do today, is tell you about maybe some things you don't know and give you some new information. So we're going to start out with Ivory soap. Proctor and Gamble. Proctor and Gamble, okay? What we have is, we have William Gamble, James Proctor, who formed together a soap maker and a candle maker in this company, and they started out with one product at first, and that was Ivory soap, the soap that floats. What happened was they had got some air into a soap mixture and found out that it floated. So what a great thing this was for people at that time. So you'll still see today, as I'm showing you right now, plenty of Ivory soap along the way, but they had so much more, and we're going to tell you exactly some of the products they have besides Ivory soap, ones that you might be familiar with, okay? Like Pampers, like Bounty paper towels. I could go on and on about the list, because Crest toothpaste. And again, I take the rest of our video just talking about Procter and Gamble, but as I said, I never did tell my students that because I wanted to find all kind of different things along the way. But we're going to take you through a tour here and talk about different items that were invented or first started in Ohio, just like Ivory soap. We're here in the ice cream aisle, and we're showing off some very familiar products with a lot of varieties that you might not have known was right here from Ohio. William Isley started a dairy in Mansfield, Ohio, and he was known for his giant ice cream cones. They were called skyscraper cones. They had special scoops, they had to have special training. These things were so huge, it's amazing they didn't all melt all over the place, but people loved them. But in 1922, at his largest store in Youngstown, Ohio, he invented the Klondike bar. These square ice cream treats, which originally, this is really interesting, originally they were sold only in Ohio and Pennsylvania. Now they are sold all over not only the nation, but all over the country, that they sell these Klondike bars. So this was a great invention. You can see there's all kind of varieties. We're showing just two of them. But there's Isley stores, William Isley, a real legend in the ice cream world. And another ice cream novel to go and talk about is from Harry Bird. Now he's from Youngstown also. Now Harry Bird, with ice cream, one of his daughters actually said, you know, wouldn't it be better if we could hold on to ice cream under the cone with a stick? And he thought about that, and he said, well, okay, how am I going to do that? Well, it was the idea of putting chocolate coating over the ice cream on a stick. That was called, his company was called the Good Humor Company. You still find Good Humor bars all over the place for sale. And it's so interesting because all of us have seen ice cream trucks, and when they have the bells ringing, that was Harry Bird who invented the ice cream truck. Later he added the sounds, the music, the whole deal. So this summer, you see an ice cream truck going by, think of Ohioan Harry Bird from Youngstown, Ohio. And one of my favorite snacks, and they even have my favorite variety, extra cheesy Cheez-Its, and they have all kind of different varieties as you can see, was actually invented in Ohio. And this was actually in Dayton, Ohio. So what happened was, the Green and Green Bakery, they decided they needed to have a cheese cracker. So they actually came up with this idea, and it was actually originally not called Cheez-Its, okay? They were called Rare Bits. And Rare Bits were actually a name they used for putting cheese over toast. And that name didn't go very well. That didn't go very well. So they came up with the name Cheez-Its, And this has been a snack staple all over the United States, all over the world, right here from Dayton, Ohio. One of everyone's favorite foods are hot dogs. And it's amazing how here in Ohio, we claim the invention of hot dogs by a man named Harry Stevens from Niles, Ohio. Harry Stevens was known as the inventor of ballpark food. The popcorn, the things you see at baseball games, okay? Ice cream, for example. That was all Harry Stevens that started that. He also had the first baseball scoreboard. I mean, he really loved sports, but he always liked making money by selling food. Well, one time on an April home game for the Giants, what happened was that it was really, really cold. And no one was buying any ice cream, obviously. So he came up with the idea of putting a German sausage, and he told his vendors to put them in a bun. And people just thought it was wonderful. They thought it was absolutely wonderful. And what happened was that he got a lot of press coverage about this. And one of the newspaper writers, he was so interested, and he asked Harry Stevens, what do you call these? And he said, well, they're Dachshund sausages. And the newspaper writer said, okay. He goes back to write the article, and he couldn't spell Dachshund. So he called them hot dogs. Often referred to as red hots, but the actual first time in our country to have a hot dog was the result of Ohio and Harry Stevens. Now, besides hot dogs, or cookouts, everything, picnics, we think of hamburgers. Well, guess what? Ohioans also invented the hamburger. The Menchie brothers from Canton, Ohio, they were under different fairs, and they would sell their pork sausage sandwiches. And they were in Erie County, New York, in the city of Hamburg for their fair. And they sold out of all their pork sausage. So they went to their supplier there, and he said, I don't have any more pork, but you know what? Why don't you try ground beef? So they fried it up, and it was terrible. It didn't taste good at all. So what they did is they put coffee in it, they put brown sugar in it, they put some other spices in it, and all of a sudden they said, wow, this is really great. So they started selling these hamburgers, and the reason, of course, it's called hamburgers is because they were at the fair in Hamburg, New York. And what's really cool about it is the Menchie brothers, they have some of their restaurants still in Canton, Nassau, that area there in Stark County, and you can get the original recipe hamburger that the Menchie brothers had when they invented the hamburger in Hamburg, New York. Okay, we're here in the candy aisle at Miller's Grocery Store, and I'm showing off something that probably everybody has, Dum-Dums. In fact, by reaching in my pocket here, I even have one ready here, okay, along the way. But this is a candy made in Bryan, Ohio, the Spangler Candy Company. And I want to tell you, if you've ever had a Dum-Dum, which I think probably everybody has, you've seen them all around, they produce over 12 million a day. Think about that, over 12 million of these a day. So that's why you see them so many different places. Now, Spangler Candy is also one of the largest producers of candy canes. Now, we're not in the holiday season right now, so the best I could do when I get into my pocket here is show you one of the mini candy canes, along with all my candy that's in here. Here we go, one of the mini candy canes. So they make small candy canes, big color candy canes, different flavor candy canes, and it's a fun place to visit, okay? So make sure you stop in Bryan, Ohio, Northwest Ohio, Spangler Candy Company, and they have a wide variety of things, but this is what they're known for more than anything. Okay, another candy that you might be really well aware of are Lifesavers. We all know what Lifesavers are. They also have different varieties along the way. What happened in Garrettsville, Ohio, okay, Clarence Crane was a chocolate maker. And he was known all over Northeast Ohio for his fine chocolates. But some of his customers complained they melt too easily during the summertime. We love your chocolates, but they melt. So he came up with the idea of making this candy Lifesavers, one of the most popular candies throughout the entire world. Lifesavers, and you can see they have all kind of varieties of Lifesavers, and that's due to Clarence Crane of Garrettsville, Ohio. All of us like to have our drinks. Doesn't matter what kind we have, but what happens is, for the ones who get them in a can, okay, we have to realize that we're all used to the pull top cans, okay? This is something we're all used to. But guess what? It had to be invented. And Ermal Frazee of Dayton, he went to a picnic in the 1950s. And back then with cans, they didn't have these. You had a can opener that you put into one side, then into the other side, and they were different things, and they were called a church key. That's what they called those can openers. Well, he got to this picnic, forgot his church key. So in the 1950s, in the late 1950s, the cars coming out of Detroit, the American cars, all had huge tail fins on them. They were supposed to look like spaceships because of the space era, the space race. So he used this tail fin to open up his can of beer. He went home and it said, I've got to come up with something better than the tail fin, and he invented the pull top can. Right here, the pull top can. Right from Dayton, Ohio. You're from particularly northeast Ohio, Youngstown, Cleveland, Akron, that area, northeast Ohio. You know what these are, and they're sold everywhere. Like we're right here at Miller's Market in Clyde, Ohio, northwest Ohio. Pierogies. Now, what happened was the immigrants from Eastern Europe they come from Ukraine, Slovakia. Those are the people who started out with these pockets of dough, is what they are. And they've used fillings on these like little dumplings, don't they? Pierogies. And so they had potato ones, cheese, sauerkraut, even prune pierogies. Now this is such a big deal in Northeast Ohio that we actually have in October a National Pierogi Day, which was started right here in Ohio. And in January, the city of Cleveland even has a full pierogi week. So if you've never tried pierogies, here's one brand you see in all the grocery stores called Mrs. T's. Also, I might recommend if you're in the Cleveland area, a trip to Parma. The Parma pierogies, they're awesome. Because Maya's going to check us out here at the wonderful Miller's grocery store in Clyde, Ohio, and she's going to be using a cash register. Now, the cash register was invented by James Riddy of Dayton, Ohio, but we also had Paul McEnroe from Dayton, Ohio, who invented, which he's going to be using here, the barcode, the UPC card. So this here, which everybody goes when they come to a wonderful cashier, or whether they do self-service at some other stores, they use this here, the Universal Product Code, invented in Ohio.
Okay.
We're here in Arby's fast food restaurant in Clyde, Ohio, on Route 20, the major east-west thoroughfare going through northern Ohio. And we're here to talk about a really interesting Ohio. This is something with fast food. Most people don't realize the interesting history of Arby's. Arby's is a very popular restaurant chain. Started by the Ralph brothers in Boardman, Ohio, which is a suburb of Youngstown, Ohio. And what happened was they were in the restaurant equipment sales, and they went around to all these different restaurants. And at this time, in the 1950s, late 1950s, was the rise of the hamburger places. Starting out with McDonald's, obviously, and then starts out to Burger King and different places along the way. Well, as they went around to these different restaurants, they thought maybe they would come up with a different type of business plan. And a different business plan was to do roast beef sandwiches instead. So they started the first Arby's, once again, in Boardman, Ohio. And it's interesting because they were not going to call it Arby's. That was not the original name. The original name they wanted to use was Big Tex. And unfortunately, that name was used. So they had to think of something else. So what they did was, and this surprises people because they think maybe Arby was a person. Arby wasn't a person. It is the Raffle Brothers, R.B., the Raffle Brothers, where it comes from. But you'll see, and still today at Arby's, the big cowboy hat. That's part of their advertising strategy from the beginning. And that's because at the time of these late 50s, the hottest thing on TV was TV Westerns. They were by far the most popular shows. So that's why they picked the cowboy hat as their symbol, their logo, which you still see today at all of the Arby's. Okay, well, we're in the car in the famous Lexus, okay, which has been a school with the kids at school. They know where my car is all the time, and I hear that from them all the time, from the kids at the junior high and the high school that I had at Bellevue Elementary. We see your car, so we know you were somewhere at Bass's grocery store, whatever. But we're in the Lexus, and we're heading right now to Route 20, as we mentioned, the major east-west route here, and we're stopped at a traffic light. Now, what's interesting about this is we take traffic lights for granted. We see them all the time. Well, the electric traffic light was invented in Ohio, in Cleveland, Ohio, in 1914. The original traffic lights had only two lights, red and green. Then we had another Cleveland inventor in 1923 that invented the tricolor, okay, with our yellow lights. That didn't happen until 1923, and we still have that today, of course. That is the accepted traffic light all throughout, not just Ohio, but our country, the tricolor traffic light. We should also mention, we're on a very nice road here on Route 20, that Ohio also had the first brick road in the United States in Bellefontaine, Ohio. So there's been a lot of notable things in Ohio. We mentioned already about Harvey Firestone. We mentioned about Charles Goodyear. Cyberling was from Ohio. I mean, so many of these early inventors in the rubber industry, as the automotive industry grade, and actually right here in Clyde, Ohio, they actually made some cars here too in Clyde, Ohio. So it's, you know, it's something that the auto industry and its offshoots have made a lot of progress throughout the years. And Ohio is still really known as a great manufacturing state in so many ways. Okay, we're here today at a drug mart in Clyde, Ohio, and we're in their toy section. And one of the toys that is very popular, has been popular for years, is Play-Doh. What most people don't know, when this was invented in the 1930s, it was a wallpaper cleaner, because people had a lot of the coal heating and stuff like that, and the coal dust would get over the wallpaper, so this is what they used. It wasn't until the 1950s when the heating systems all got away from coal and everything was cleaner, that they had to think of another use for it. And that other use was to make children's toys. So Play-Doh, it's really interesting. The original color was white only. There was no other colors. Now, of course, we have all kinds of different colors in Play-Doh. A real Ohio original. Another really interesting Ohio original is the Etch-a-Sketch. The Etch-a-Sketch was actually developed by a chemist in France, and was originally called the Magic Screen. And at a toy fair, he sold the rights of it to Ohio Art Company in Bryan, Ohio, and they named it the Etch-a-Sketch. They bought this in 1959, the rights to doing this magic screen. By 1960, it was the hottest selling Christmas toy for kids. Everybody wanted an Etch-a-Sketch. Luckily at the time, it didn't cost the parents too much. It was only $2.99 for the original Etch-a-Sketch. And the kids all loved it. I know I spent quite a bit of time on an Etch-a-Sketch, and they were really great to have all our different artistic things along the way. Still a very popular take today, as does Play-Doh. We are right now close to dinner time, and wow, we're just not the older ones getting hungry. A lot of places are hungry right now, particularly our fast food places as we go through these areas along the way. Now, we're pulling into Wendy's right now, which has a very interesting story, but before we do that, we need to really talk about the idea of the fact that fast food with hamburgers actually started in 1920 in Columbus, Ohio, with the White Castle chain. Billy Ingram started that with the idea of having 5-cent little hamburgers called sliders. He sold them by the bag, and it just took off. It became so popular, not just in Columbus, Central Ohio, but as it spread throughout the state. White Castle fans all over the nation. And in 1994, Time magazine said that White Castle sliders was the most influential hamburger ever made. And what's interesting, again, at White Castle is you're getting the same recipe exactly like it was that Billy Ingram put together when he founded that White Castle chain. Now, of great note, we're pulling into Wendy's, as we mentioned, and Dave Thomas, okay, the founder of Wendy's, was not from Ohio. He had a really rough childhood as an orphan and was moved around to several different places. But he ended up in the food business in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And while there, he was with a local restaurant group. And he became really good at what he was doing, really worked his way up. And as a manager, one of the people that came to talk to him about selling their product was Colonel Harlan Sanders. Colonel Harlan Sanders, Kentucky Fried Chicken fame. Dave Thomas was really good at what he did, so Colonel Sanders had some very unperforming stores. Dave Thomas, if he would go and turn those stores around, then he would take ownership. He would be able to buy into them along the way. And this was a big break for Dave Thomas that Colonel Sanders gave him. Thank you. And so what happens is that Dave Thomas sells those Kentucky Fried Chicken franchises, goes to Columbus, Ohio, which was known for being a test market because of the fact that, you know, so many people live within 500 miles of Columbus, Ohio. It was thought to be the place where if you're going to do a new product, you went to Columbus. So he goes to Columbus. There's White Castle hamburgers, which Dave Thomas does not enjoy. He says, there's not a good hamburger in this town. So he comes up with the Wendy's hamburger, the square patties, named after his daughter, okay, Melinda Lou, who couldn't pronounce Melinda, they called her Wendy. So named after his daughter, Dave Thomas became very famous doing TV commercials for Wendy's. They were real classic things.
There you are. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay, you too. So, you know, Dave Thomas was a real American entrepreneur. That Wendy's is, of course, one of the largest hamburger chains. After McDonald's, they're number 2, Burger King's number 3. But here's this guy with these humble beginnings of starting out to the fact that, you know, we need to have a good hamburger in Columbus, Ohio. And so when you think about that, the first Wendy's was in Columbus, okay? It's still there on Broad Street. So it's a place that you might want to check out sometime. Go to any Wendy's, because the food is great at Wendy's. And think of Dave Thomas, not a native Ohioan, but spent most of his life in Ohio when he developed the Wendy's hamburger chain. Now, if you're in Cincinnati, one of the things you're going to do tonight, this is Friday, so we're in Lent, so if you're a Catholic, you can't do this, okay? But outside of that, we have the famous Cincinnati chili, invented by Greek immigrants who came to that Cincinnati area. The Cincinnati chili is not like chili that we think of from Tex-Mex, whatever, not the traditional chili that we think of. But it's beloved in Cincinnati and quite a few places outside of that. And it's all here. You can get it even here. Several places along the way in northern Ohio sell them in the grocery stores. You can buy Cincinnati chili. Usually it's Skyline or Gold Star. And it's so interesting because you order it in different ways. Like if you get a 2-way, okay, it's just the spaghetti noodles and the chili. That would be it, okay? But it goes up to a 5-way where you get the noodles, the chili, you could get beans on it, cheese on it. I mean, there's different ways of ordering it. Now, when you buy it at Kroger's, for example, it's one way. But it's so unusual that people that aren't from that area don't understand it. Now, speaking of things that people don't understand, and Friday night is always a big pizza night. And Lent, it's always cheese pizza now, okay, for the good Catholics. But, now speaking of pizza, we have one right here in Clyde, Ohio. We have Marco's Pizza. And there's Marco's Pizza, is one of the fastest growing pizza chains, not only in the United States, but throughout the world. There's Marco's Pizzas. It started out with one little store in Oregon, Ohio, just east of Toledo, kind of a suburb of Toledo. And what happened was that the gentleman who started this firm, Pasquale, okay, his first name was Pasquale, or Pat, okay, and it was Gianmarco. And so that's where the Marcos comes from. But he was born in Italy. He didn't come here until he was a young boy. And the first thing he did was work in his father's pizza shop. And it was an authentic Italian recipe because they came from Italy. So when you go to a Marco's today, there's a lot of national chain pizza stores. The only one that was founded by a native Italian, because remember, he was born in Italy before he came here, was Marco's Pizza. So I think that's a really interesting story. So we've talked about all kind of different foods in Ohio. So what I'd like to do is invite you, if we have some things we missed that you find are really interesting that you know from where you're at, let us know. Give us some comments. Help us out as we go through this. Now, today in school, a number of my students, when I was substituting today, asked me about, hey, when are the rest of those counties coming? Okay, we love your YouTube channel, but we need to see more counties, and they're coming soon. Okay, trust me, they're coming soon. We've been working on several of them already, and throwing these different special things in here along the way has been a lot of fun. We plan on continuing to do that also. So thank you for watching. Bon appetit, everybody that watches. Thank you.